Hello, everyone. Welcome to this bright and sunny, but still very cold Thursday morning for our get together at the Media Row podcast with me, Justin Miller. A lot to get to. It was a great night of college basketball where you had Drake continue to win, shooting probably their best night offensively, but still, it's just not in their DNA, I guess, to blow teams out. Only winning by 4 against Illinois State. You had games in the Valley that lived up to the hype, games that did not live up to the hype, and then you had amazing performance from the number 2 team in the country that's only 30 minutes north of Des Moines in Ames, where Iowa State dominates number 9 Kansas in a game that I think a lot of people thought was going to be closer. So, great basketball last night, more basketball tonight that we'll get to, and also just some good news for the future. Put in my credentials request for Arch Madness in St. Louis. So really excited to go back down there. Went down there in 2023 as a student to broadcast Drake's victory over Bradley, and was awesome. Was a great experience. Probably, I ran into Ryan Gledhill, who is a student at Drake, and he was a freshman when I was a junior, so got to know Ryan a little bit, and JD and I were good friends with Ryan, JD Snover, who now works at iHeart, who's still a great buddy of mine, and I remember Ryan last night actually just saying, hey, I'm calling the game, for DBS, the Drake Broadcasting System, tomorrow night. So hopefully I'll see you there. I was like, yep, I'll be there. And he goes, I'm sure you don't miss those days. And I was like, actually, I do. I know the equipment wasn't the best. It's just student radio broadcast equipment. But I loved it. I loved going to every game, broadcasting. Some games I sucked at when I was broadcasting. Some games went really well. The best story I have, and JD and I still talk about this, and I'll bring it up probably again next week when Drake plays UNI. But that season, 2023, so I was a senior by then, and calling the games, every home game I called for Drake. And JD's with me for the UNI game. I had like 102 fever. But I was like, I'm a senior. I'm not missing the biggest rivalry of Drake and UNI. I'm not missing that opportunity to call that game. So if you remember, that's the one where Drake's up at the end of regulation, and then Bowen Bourne hits a half-court shot to force overtime. And I remember JD and I were like, oh my God, I can't believe he just hit that. Excited that we get extra basketball despite being sick. Ryan calls it my Michael Jordan flu game, which I appreciate, but it wasn't that dramatic. I was just sitting there. But so I'm there drained, sweating because I'm this fever is kicking my ass. And then if you remember, Drake goes up at the end of the first overtime, and in the same exact spot, Bowen Bourne hits the second 3. And everybody loses their mind. And I'm sitting there, and I was like, Bowen Bourne has just created an enemy. Why you would hit that shot when I'm sitting here fighting for my life is pretty rude. And I remember just sitting there and like slouching down more in my chair. But yeah, I miss those DBS days. I loved it. Traveling down to St. Louis was an all-timer, and then to have Drake win it all for the first time since 2008, it just, everything was full circle. It was perfect. But just put in my media credentials for Media Row, and I can't wait. I can't wait to get it started. So I'll keep you guys updated on when I hear back about that as well. And I'll hopefully see a lot of you in St. Louis come early March. But let's jump into last night. So the Drake Bulldogs, like we said, it's just not in their DNA to blow teams out. Drake up by 14 against Illinois State. Illinois State shooting like 1 of 9. Drake, on the other hand, is shooting over 50%, looking confident. We saw Bennett Sturts being aggressive early, looking for his shot early. Mascari was getting shots up. He's still just in a shooting slump, and I can't wait to see him get out of it, because when he is in a rhythm, he is one of the best shooters in all of college basketball. But he's just kind of on this roller coaster right now through this conference stretch. But he was getting shots up. Manyao was looking good, guarding Walker, who was struggling early on for Illinois State, the big man we mentioned. And then you have Abreu, who is just dominant from start to finish. But anyways, you have Drake go off on a 14-point lead. Everything's looking great. And all of a sudden, that 14-point lead, you look up and it's gone. And Drake never surrendered the lead. But man, Illinois just chipped away. They just chipped away that lead that Drake had built. And despite Drake shooting their most efficient game, shot over 50% from the field and shot over 40% from beyond the arc, they just couldn't blow the team out. It's just, like I said, not in their DNA. It's not their style to blow teams out. And it was a weird game. I mean, that's one of those, like, I was sitting there looking at the box score, and I'm like, well, Drake's out rebounding them. They're not turning over the ball. They're shooting really good. Why is Illinois State being able to only down by 1? And to be honest, I don't know what Illinois State did. I don't know. And to maybe help us figure that out, here's Coach McCollum right after the game, his initial thoughts on the 66-62 victory last night.
I thought Illinois State played great. I thought they really stuck to their game plan of going inside to Chase, and he's a load down there, and he can really pass it out of there too. Made it really difficult for us to pull away. I thought then, I think it was Banks, number 3, was fantastic defensively throughout the game. So again, made it difficult for us to pull away. I thought we played well in spurts, competed in spurts. I thought we wanted to win more than we wanted to compete. And sometimes that happens during the season, and sometimes you just have to survive, the old survive in advance. You just have to survive these games a little bit. And I thought we survived it. Need to make sure that next game we come out with a higher level of competitive spirit to want to compete rather than just win.
And I want to touch on something Coach said there. And I asked him about it again right afterwards to kind of like, hey, can you expand on that? Because he brings up the players were more focused on winning than they were about competing. And for, someone just sitting there watching the game, you're like, well, don't you want your players more focused on winning? So that's why I asked him, I said, well, can you go more in depth? Like, what's the difference and what's the problem with that mentality? And he gave a great answer of saying how winning is something you can't control. Your effort in competing is something you can't control. And so what he's saying there is that he wants his players, when you're competing, you have a 14-point lead and you want to make it 16. And then you want to make it 20. And then you want to see how far you can take it. When you're worried about winning, you have that 14-point lead and you kind of get comfortable. So he said there was moments where he could tell mentally the guys were competing. And then he said he could tell at moments the guys were just worried about, just wanted to win. And he says that happens, during these stretches where you're playing more games and less breaks. But I thought that was a great quote. And again, McCollum just continues to impress me. I love how he holds guys accountable. He's not a coach to ever go, it's not on me, it's on someone else. If he messes up, he'll take credit for it, or he'll be accountable for it. And he expects his players to do the same. And Drake, all those guys respond so well. I mean, I love watching Ben McCollum because I loved Darren DeVries. But watching him coach, he would kind of just give you like that dad stare when he was upset. And Ben McCollum is the exact opposite. That dude's jumping up and down. There's multiple times where he will ask a player, like, what the hell are you doing? And the players sit there and they listen because they respect him. And he respects the players too, because what's cool is in between breaks, you see players huddle up. I mean, it's like what we mentioned a few shows ago with Allison Pullman of how it's cool during timeouts, both Drake men and women, the coaches huddle up and kind of discuss things. And then you have the players sitting there and they're discussing things. And maybe that's more common than I think it is, but I don't see that often. When I was covering Iowa State, TJ was always in the middle. They would get the chairs out in the court. His chair would be in the middle every time out. And yeah, there'd be a few moments where you'd see Taman Lipsey or Gilbert, talking to each other, figuring things out. But overall, I don't think I've seen, both from the men or women's side, two teams do this as often as we see Drake. And I just think it speaks to the culture both coaches have built and the players they have put. They've put the right pieces together on the team, the right attitudes, the right mentalities. And I think that's just a great quote, because when we're sitting there, me, Alyssa, and Tommy Birch sitting there trying to be like, what is happening? Why is Drake not blowing this out? And you have a coach kind of describe the competing over winning. That's a damn good quote. So thank you, coach. Because I think that's the best way to explain it. I think that's the mental lapse that all humans have when you just get comfortable. You see that 14-point lead, you get comfortable. Isaiah Jackson, he gave a little bit in the press conference of what happened with Isaiah Jackson. He's getting a little more minutes. I asked if he was on a time constraint whatsoever, or if coaches, are worried about his time out there, because the last two games, Isaiah Jackson played basically 6 minutes and 30 seconds, and then he was done. Didn't play the second half. Last night, Isaiah Jackson plays for 11 minutes and 15 seconds. No points, a couple of rebounds, no assists. And again, he just doesn't look 100%. And I didn't ask coach because I didn't think I'd get, that's something coaches are going to hold close to their chest, is starting lineups and, rotations for the most part. So I'm not going to ask coach, why are you starting Isaiah Jackson? But it is a question I have. I mean, he's not 100%. Coach has said he's not 100%. Coach is saying he's close. But we all see it. He's just not there yet. That left ankle is definitely hurting him. And after he played 6.5 minutes early in the first half, after that first media timeout, I mean, he didn't come in for the rest of the game, or the rest of the half. They tried to sub him in with like 20 seconds left, but there was a few turnovers and no dead balls, so he didn't get put in. Second half, came in for a little bit early, and then got put back in with like 40 seconds left. So it makes everyone wonder, like, okay, do you give Isaiah Howard that spot? I mean, Tavion Banks, do you try to go bigger? Try with Banks and Mannion and Abreu out there on the floor. I don't think that'd be a bad lineup. Bennett, Miscari at the guard position. And then you have Abreu and Banks at the forwards. And then you put Mannion to guard the centers like you have all year long. I don't think that's a bad lineup decision. I mean, yeah, he clearly wants Isaiah Jackson in there. But if he's not 100% yet, let him rest a little. Let him truly heal up that ankle so that he's not going to re-aggravate it. And I know the coaches are probably well aware of how much time they can put on that ankle and what to do. But that was definitely something that is on my mind when I watch this team now, because you're just watching Isaiah Jackson and you're looking at the minutes, looking at the production, and you can just see his energy isn't at 100%. but he's still doing what you want from a great teammate. When he sits on the bench, he doesn't just sit there and watch the game. He's up there. He's helping players on position, and he's helping just motivate players. He's clapping. He's celebrating. So it's what you want from a player that's not 100% still. But so that's your update on kind of Isaiah Jackson's health. Did ask about Isaiah Howard because we saw him after having two really great games off the bench. Isaiah Howard only played 2 minutes and 58 seconds, no shots up, no rebound, no stats at all. Zeros across the board. And as coach, Isaiah Howard's been having a really good, couple of weeks. Where was he late in the game? And coach was honest. Coach said, he came out kind of tough to get into a rhythm with the rest of the guys. He wasn't there. So he took him out. And then the game just got closer and it became a possession game. So then it becomes harder to sub guys in and out. So that's the reason behind Isaiah Howard. I think he'll start getting more playing time because it is tough to sit an athlete like Isaiah. And especially a freshman who is on a hot streak. You don't want to let the guy cool down on the bench. Let him still go out there and perform. And I think Isaiah Howard, so with Jackson, again, I'll go back to with Jackson being in the starting lineup, Jackson's bread and butter is his rebounding, and he's really good on defense. He's not looked upon as much of a scorer, but he is looked upon as a facilitator and as someone on defense that can grab rebounds. I think as Isaiah Howard's been doing that exceptionally well. Isaiah Howard has been impressing me with his rebounding. He crashes the glass for not being really tall. He spaces the floor well for a freshman. He doesn't look scared out there. He doesn't look nervous or anxious or sped up. And he's been playing well on offense and getting steals on defense. So I wonder, put Howard in the starting spot. You go with that, you kind of stay with that 3-guard lineup that you're trying to do with Isaiah Jackson, but you just put Howard in. So I don't know if that's maybe a change we'll see from Ben and the coaching staff, but so far it's been trending that Isaiah Jackson has his starting spot. He's going to start, play the first 6 minutes. Media timeout, he's done for that half, and sometimes the rest of the game, but it just depends. Hopefully, though, Isaiah Jackson will be healthy going on the road against Indiana State because coach is saying he's really close. But sometimes we know that can be coach speak too. So we'll just have to keep an eye out on it. So you had Jackson's injury. People were wondering about what happened with Isaiah Howard. Why wasn't he getting much playing time? So there's kind of what coach said about the freshman. And then great effort by Cam Manyow and just the forwards and Ferguson, Banks, Abreu, in really trying their hardest to take down Walker. Walker in the first half scored 9 points, 11 points in the second, putting up a team high 20 points. But he didn't look comfortable by any means. He started to get into a rhythm middle of the second half, doing more of what we are used to him doing, of those clean post moves, of pump fakes, getting guys in the air, layups. But in the first half, definitely Drake was causing issues. Illinois State couldn't get the ball to him. If they did, Drake was able to double team. But coach mentioned how what made him hard to guard in that second half was he's a great passer too. So you try to help down, but he can pass it out. So then it's harder to cover up your defense. So there's just many things going against them with Walker. But yeah, you can look at the box score and see Chase Walker, 8 of 12, 4 or 5 at the free throw line, 20 points. And that's a good night, don't get me wrong. But you watch the game, and it doesn't feel like he has 20 points. In the second half, you go, okay, there's the offensive beast in the paint that we know. But in that first half and the start of the second half, he definitely was having troubles. And that's a credit to Cam Manyow, and that's a credit to the coaching staff coming up with a strategy to try to contain him. Because he's one of those guys, he's so good, and he's only a sophomore. He's just going to get better. But he's a tough guy to just completely take out of the game because he's so versatile with his passing, with his scoring, but also he's efficient too. He doesn't take a lot of bad shots. So that's another thing I wanted to shed light on. Huge credit to Walker. And then the player of the game for the Drake Bulldogs, thought it might be Sturts with how aggressive he started off, but Daniel Abreu, 23 points. Over 20 points for only the second time this season. The first time was against York in the very first game of the season where he put up 30. But 23 points, 4 of 5 from deep, so he's showing off what he can do when he stretches defenses out there. And what I just love about his game is his pump faking. He gets that ball on the corners or on the baseline, on the 3-point line. He pump fakes, gets guys up every time, especially when he's shooting as well as he did last night. And he drives. And last night he had a hammer dunk driving down the baseline. I love the way Daniel Abreu plays that stretch 4 position. He plays it very well. And sure, he may not score over 20 points very often, but he is going to get his. He is going to be a efficient scorer for the most part for Drake. Now, the entire Drake offense has had ups and downs. But when you watch him playing at his best, it is a thing of beauty. And as someone who grew up watching a lot of, power forwards and centers, as someone playing a power forward center position in high school, it's just, I love it. I love watching his game. And he for how big he is, he moves well on defense too. He can cover up positions. He can help down and quickly move out if the ball is kicked out. He knows where to be on the floor. He's communicating. And all this being said, Daniel Abreu doesn't really like basketball. I mean, he loves playing it, clearly. But he has said thousands of times to us that he would rather watch Star Wars than watch March Madness. And I think that's always hilarious to me. Like Bo Jackson, a multi-sport athlete, in his ESPN 30 for 30 always talks about how he'd rather just be like shooting arrows than watching an Auburn football game. It's like, what? Then how'd you become so good? Just natural talent, I guess. But Coach McCollum with an all-timer, by the way, on this. I asked him about Daniel Abreu's game and if, was there something Illinois State was showing on film where you guys knew the ball would be going to Abreu quite often and he would become an X factor? And this is Coach McCollum's quote, and maybe my favorite quote from Coach so far this season.
They left him open too much. I don't know. I just had a good game. I don't know. I have to see on film. We don't really go in with a huge expectation. So, not just him, but anybody. It's just whoever the hot hand finds, that's who does. And he played great. I thought he was great offensively. I thought he did compete offensively at a high level.
Mic drop. Drop the mic. Just after you say they left him open too much. They left him open. I love that line. Just drop the mic there, Coach. You'd be just fine. But Daniel Abreu, 23 points. Drake wins 66-62. Shot over 40% from the field and 40% from the 3-point line for the first time in the same game since all the way back to early December against Kansas State. So I'm not kidding when I say that was their most efficient game shooting. They moved the ball well. Something I wrote down early on in that first half when they were going on that 14-point lead was what I noticed. Drake was passing the ball and moving it around, swinging it more than they were dribbling. And that's huge for this Drake offense. And when Illinois State started to close in, I started to notice they kind of reverted back to their pick and rolls deep into the shot clock, and the ball was being dribbled way more than it was being passed around. So that's probably my only critique of this team is you don't always have to, and I'm sure Coach McCollum tells them this too. He said it in the press conference when I asked about, Bennett being more aggressive, is don't overthink the shot. You can take 100 shots. We won't be mad. And I know it's just not the style. They like to play that methodical style. But, man, was it pretty early on when they were moving the ball around. So, Drake gets the 4-point victory. They now move on to play at Indiana State, which Drake fans know is never easy. This Indiana State team, we'll get to them in a little bit, what happened to them last night. But it will be an interesting Saturday matchup. Have that on, and then also watch the Drake women 2 against Murray State on Saturday. That game is in the Knapp Center, though. But before we just finish out with Drake today, saw this really cool note. Shout out to Mike Mahan. Because Ben McCollum, like we said, he's just a winner. Ben McCollum continues to win his now with that, his winning percentage is up to .815, which now puts him 5th all-time among all college coaches in win percentage. He's behind Adolph Rupp from Kentucky and ahead of John Wooden from UCLA. Yes, I know there's clear differences. You have guys that won national championships in Division I, multiple. You have arguably the greatest coach of basketball of all time with Wooden and what he was able to do with UCLA, where we haven't seen a team win 3 straight titles since his UCLA team, when not only did they win 3 titles in a row, they won like 10. So I get it. There's clear differences from Ben McCollum and John Wooden. But regardless, the numbers are the numbers, and it's a cool stat to see your name up there in the top 5 all time. So congratulations to Coach McCollum. I'm 100% sure. If I sat down and asked Coach McCollum, hey, what's your thoughts on this? He would be very humble and brush it off. But just wanted to get that stat in there. I know there's clear differences, but very cool from Coach McCollum. Top 5 all time now in winning percentage in college basketball history. Let's get to now, you had Bradley, Indiana State. That was a game I was really excited for because earlier, a few weeks ago, that game goes into overtime at Indiana State. Bradley wins off of a Duke Dean layup. Very awesome atmosphere, was back and forth battle. Thought the same. And then I'm sitting there watching the Drake game and just happened to peek down at my phone. And I had to do the rub your eyes and what did I just see? 66-33 at the half. Indiana State, did you show up? What the hell is happening? And I go through the box score and I'm like, yep, that's wrong. That's what happened. Everything we said Indiana State can't do, they're doing right now. So only one Sycamore scored more than 10 points, and you can guess who it is. And yes, it was Teal. Samaj Teal, who we said was going to get his, but he needs help. And he did not get it. 4 out of the 5 starters for Indiana State, they combined for only 16 points, with Wagner leading the way and the rest of the starters with only 6 points. And then we bring up, all right, you're going up against Montgomery and Dean. You have to try to contain them. Now, it's going to be tough, easier said than done, and you're not going to stop them. But We've seen Missouri State hold Dean to only 5 points. Dean didn't have a great game against Drake. It's possible. And they combined for 30 points, 6 3-pointers. And you just go, yep, those are the reasons the final score is 118-65. In a game that did not live up to the hype. And I have a buddy in Nathan Fisher who went to Bradley, was a buddy of mine at iHeart. And he and I were just texting this morning about the game. And I said, and not meaning this in a, yeah, look what Drake did. I'm meaning this as sincere, like, this could be the motivation factor, is that loss to Drake could have woke up a giant. I mean, Bradley's a damn good team. That's why they were the clear favorite to win the league. They have the most players returning. They had their coach returning, which is tough to do in this conference. And this offense has showed out. Against Indiana State, 16 3-pointers as a team, shot 55% from the field, multiple players putting up 15-plus points. I mean, this is a dangerous team. And it's going to be interesting how they now, after playing Drake once, what will happen towards the end of the year. But this, Drake may have woken up a giant. So while that game lived up to the hype, while that game didn't live up to the hype, a game that did was Murray State and UIC last night. Double overtime, UIC wins at home 97-93, snapping a 3-game win streak for Murray State. And I mean, we talked about it. It was going to be an offensive explosion, and that's what you got. Racer score, both teams score 9+ 3-pointers. They both shot over 40%. And you just had great guard play. You had all 3 starting guards for Murray State put up 10+. And then you had Javion Jackson, the junior guard, and you also had Freeman, the other guard for UIC. They both put up 21+ points. Jackson with 30 points. Freeman with 21. And that was a huge reason UIC won, because you look at the box score, and much like the Drake game where you're sitting there wondering, okay, you had Murray State. They shot just as well as UIC. They didn't turn over the ball as much as UIC. I mean, UIC had 20 turnovers. UIC missed more free throws. And UIC still won. And then you look and you go, oh, because those 2 guards just went off. They were the offense for UIC, and Murray State just couldn't contain them. But Murray State, they battled back. They were down 7 with 11 seconds to go, scored 7 points in those 11 seconds to force overtime, force double overtime. They were battling, but what a great game. And it's so nice when games live up to the hype, because, yes, if you're a Bradley fan, that blowout win is fun to watch. But just as a Valley fan, you're sitting there going, oh, damn, we got this one wrong. And last night, we did not get Murray State UIC wrong. 97-93. Prom and his team still look good. Yeah, they didn't shoot over 50% from both the field and 3-point arc like they have been during this winning stretch. But, man, they're still efficient. They're still getting a lot of production from their starters. Both teams don't have great depth by any mean, but Murray State is starting to figure things out offensively, and that's not a bad loss. UIC is a really good offensive team. 2 teams that just matched up really well, and we saw why. So Murray State loses 97-93 over the Flames. Tonight, no Missouri Valley Conference games. Tomorrow, no Missouri Valley Conference games on the men's side. Games start on Saturday. But we have Drake women's basketball tonight, so make sure you follow along for that. But as we're running out of time here, want to quickly hit on the biggest game in the country that was happening 30 minutes north in Ames. Number 2, Iowa State against number 9, Kansas. Everyone thought this one was going to be close. I think Kansas was favored by 6 even going into it. And Iowa State, without Milan Momcilovic, 74-57. This team is legit. Otzelberger has built a beast. And we talked about McCollum getting the right guys and the right fit. That is exactly what Otzelberger has been able to do. His recruiting has been fantastic. I mean, Keyshawn Gilbert and Curtis Jones. Keyshawn at UNLV, I think, was averaging maybe 4.5 points. Curtis Jones was averaging like 3 points at Buffalo. And now you have Curtis Jones go out there, put up 20 points in the first, 25 points in the entire game. You have Keyshawn Gilbert, who didn't have a great night offensively last night, but we've seen what he's been able to do throughout this season. And so just kudos to what Otzelberger has been able to do and the fire this team plays with. They're the best team in the country right now. I think so. I know Auburn beat them, but I think if those two teams play right now again, it would go down to the last second. I just think this Iowa State team is on a different level. It's been a long time since we've seen a team with this great of a defense still have a really, really good offense. And like we said, no Momcilovic hurt his hand during a practice, and it was announced early in the morning. It was confirmed like early afternoon. And he's going to be out for a while. I mean, I think they said like 10 plus games he could be out. And I wasn't too nervous, and I've heard a lot of people say this, not too nervous about him being out because of the ability of Jones. But the Big 12 is just a beast. So it's a gut punch when you lose a guy who's shooting over 45% from beyond the arc and puts up 11 points off your bench. And Cyclone fans know how good Momcilovic can be. So it wasn't a problem last night, could be a problem though moving forward. And then did we get it right or did we get it right at Media Row? We said for Iowa State to win, they need to force turnovers. Check. For Iowa State to win, they need offensive and defensive greatness from their bigs, and that's what they got. Jefferson, 10 points. And then you had Jackson, who's coming off the bench, putting up 17 points against Dickinson, who is the best big man in the country. And I think he's regressed this year. It's tough to say that when the guy is averaging 18 and 11 points. But last night, Iowa State just got in his face. We said, try to get him to turn over the ball once or twice. Hell, Iowa State said, how about we make it 4? 4 turnovers from Hunter, only 6 points, 3 of 10 shooting, just completely took him out of the game. And kudos to Iowa State and high fives to all of us. Media Row got it right. And Bill Self with a great quote on Deshaun Jackson, because they asked him about Curtis Jones and Jackson, and he said, yeah, Curtis Jones, you had a guy who looked like he was really excited to play in that starting position, and then you had a guy who looked really pissed off he wasn't in that starting position. And so clearly talking about how Jones puts up 20 off the bat, and then you have a guy play just physically tough in Deshaun Jackson putting up 17. And I love Bill Self. One of my favorite interviews I've been lucky enough to do. And I now see why everyone would want to go play for Bill Self. But so that will do it for today's show. A lot to get to with Drake, Iowa State, just the Missouri Valley as a whole. I need to say this because this just happened right before we clicked record. But a huge, just take time to remember Bob Uecker today. He died at the age of 90. A legend. When I remember as a kid telling my dad, hey, I want to pursue this crazy idea of being a sports broadcaster. And Bob Uecker is one of the first people I remember being told about. And so a legend, someone that always always was so humble and so funny too. Not only in Major League, but just his broadcasts and his interviews. Like that dude's a legend. And so 90 years old, passes away today. So tough one, just in the sporting world. Lost a good one in Bob Uecker. But that'll do it for today's show. Drake women's basketball tonight against Belmont. Make sure to follow along on all social media platforms because like last night, we'll have coaches interviews, hopefully some player interviews. Try to get some player interviews as much as possible. But definitely Coach Pullman will be there. Follow along for thoughts on social media. And then we'll be back tomorrow right at 2 o'clock to recap what happens tonight and to preview a huge weekend in college basketball for both the men and women. So make sure to follow along on all social media platforms and download us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Listen to Media Row. So see you guys again tomorrow.